So moving on to our last session of the afternoon, which is going to look at identity. And actually much of what's been discussed today already is really focused on the subject of identity, whether it's about how we influence, how we communicate, how we build relationships. And to bring all of this into focus, Laura Ioniemi, an expert in architectural PR for over 20 years, is going to outline what it takes to build an authentic identity for yourself and for your practice. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you to the RIBA for having us all here, and thanks for still being here. It's a long day. I am aware of time, I promise you, so I'll try and get to the point very succinctly, as it were. So identity is my topic, and as Lucy said, I've been working in architectural PR for a long while, and that basically means I've been getting mostly London practices published in architectural magazines, in consumer press, in the UK and internationally, working on exhibitions, working on books, and just working on the overall way a particular studio might want to describe themselves. So this comes to pitching for new work, to the kind of marketing materials they produce, the website copy. So really getting under the skin of the architects in terms of what they want to say about themselves. And I'm showing this, I love drawings and architects' drawings, and I'm showing you this drawing by my great friend Gabor Galov, who's also an architect. And he was commissioned to do this drawing actually for a client of mine who's based in San Francisco, an American firm called Form 4 Architecture. And the reason they wanted this drawing is they wanted to have a bit of fun and celebrate the idea of how many different strands, many different approaches there are in architecture that can all be successful, just because you're an icon maker, a minimalist. There isn't one singular way of doing things right. You can still find a valid and good solution to a project. And similarly, I would like to say that in public relations, this is absolutely true too. There is no one singular way to form your identity. And a lot of it depends on your personality and what you feel comfortable with. Some architects are really good at, being prima donnas. They're born to be superstars. They want media attention. They actually want to be celebrities. There's quite a bit of that around. Some are very different. They'd much rather be a bit enigmatic, a bit of a poet, an intellectual, an academic, and they want to be perceived as that and work very hard towards that. And that can be absolutely successful. So the thing is, I think that earlier on, you're true to yourself. You listen to, what makes me tick? There's no one to say that just because you're not boisterous and you're not an extrovert, it's not going to work. There are a lot of very successful, much more introverted or quiet architects who do a good job, perhaps just by doing that, listening, which is what we've heard about today. So the richness is there both for the work and the way you create your identity. Now, my next slide also comes from Form 4, their design director, John Marx, who I've been having lots of conversations with. It's nice to talk to Americans, actually, because they're much more uninhibited about this stuff. I'm from Finland, so we're really angst-ridden. But Americans are much more uninhibited about this stuff. And, you make friends, you do business, it's okay. But anyway, John's also had some thoughts that a lot of architects here have, which is why he had this drawing commission for the Venice Biennale. And it's a lovely drawing. It's of a man on a tightrope. And he feels this is the condition, the predicament of the architect many times. So there are loads of things, loads of pressures coming at you on projects, different interest groups that you have to weigh out and balance. But in PR, this also comes, in the identity formation, this also comes as a very critical point. And this is where I really think architects are at their weakest when they're not forming their identity well. They don't know how to balance out the cultural and commercial interests in their practice, and they get confused. So it's a slippery slope. If you don't quite know when you're pitching or when you're actually trying to communicate an idea, and you don't, of course there's overlap, but when you don't quite know, when you're just trying to get the gig and you're saying what the client wants to say, or when you're actually saying what you want to say, and it gets blurry, and that really becomes a funny situation whereby you end up doing what is called pandering. Pandering is not a good exercise in leadership because you're no longer in control when you pander. Pandering is basically saying what you need to say to get the gig. Now, of course, you can be successful in terms of winning commissions and getting money, and you can make a lot of money doing this. But it's not necessarily, making money is not the same as being a true leader in your field. So I think there has to be, and this is obviously a personal point of view, but I think it's good that there's more dignity in the way architects think about their identity. You shouldn't be just seen as salesmen, traveling salesmen with big things to sell. There should be more to it, I think. I have a pet hate. Well, it's not exactly a hate, but it's something I've become very critical of, is branding. And I think it's confused things a lot with this whole issue of architecture becoming quite commercial. A lot of big firms and small firms increasingly to resort to branding agents when they don't know what to do. They seem to think that somehow by getting someone from another world in who knows about branding is going to somehow make their design more appealing, make them more successful. I haven't seen a lot of times when this has been actually the case. Sure, you can get nicer graphics and things, but when has it actually really changed the dynamic in a practice? Not sure. Branding, this is a kind of funny example, it's Charles Rennie Mackintosh tat. That's come out of commercialization of his great designs. And branding can, result in very mixed results, not just kind of heritage tat, but I'm not showing you the contemporary examples of people you'll recognize and who are still around, but there's a lot of really pretty crass stuff that comes out of these exercises, really corporate, terrible brochures, business cards that you'd rather never give to anyone, that just come because architects are turning to people who don't understand how architecture works in terms of the identity and presenting that. Of course, architects increasingly get involved in branding too, and this can be a funny situation. I'm, as I said, from Finland, from Helsinki. This competition didn't go without my noticing it. It was for the Helsinki Guggenheim project. Nothing happened in the end. The whole thing's kaput, dead. The Helsinki councillors put an end to it. But this was about city branding, and architects were, these are some entries, and make what you will of them. There were, I think, over 1,500 in all. But architects try sometimes to pander to clients and say, oh yeah, we can brand your city. And again, this whole business of branding, all I'm trying to say, it isn't so straightforward. Branding is not a magic solution. You really need to be in charge of these terms. And this takes me to someone I admire, Stephen Bailey, who's written a fantastic book called Life's a Pitch. And he's very astute. And I think this is the level of intelligence you need when dealing with these different strands of marketing. So he says, fame is to architecture and design what brand value is to soap. Bit damning, isn't it? Architecture is not a consumer good. I don't want to go to meetings thinking, is my client an Audi or a Volvo or what have you, or a Lamborghini? It is not the same. It plays by different rules. And I think it's really important to bear that in mind, as there's so many ways now of communicating architecture, but you need to be aware of how these different tools, branding, social media, what have you, can play to best make sense of your identity. And someone who's done this well, who's sadly no longer with us, is Zaha Hadid. And some will say, of course, many will say she's a brand. And she's successful because she's a brand. But she wasn't a brand to start with. And I think this is something I really want to explain. I went to a talk where someone said, I'm a brand, you're a brand, everybody's a brand. She's certainly a brand, and got very cross with me when I said that, no, she's not a brand. Well, she wasn't a brand to start with, rather. She had vision. She had a talent, obviously. She had something to contribute to the architectural discourse. She had a way of presenting this visually, her paintings, her drawings. She went through a lot of effort to make all that right. And she did it with great skill and consistency, which is really powerful for architects. You choose a way of presenting yourself and you do it over and over again. And people start recognizing what everyone's scared to say, the word style. It's not so bad. It's good to have a style. Style is not the dirty word. I want the revival of style, because she's very stylish, was very stylish. Anyway, by doing this, she won favor eventually, and it wasn't easy at first. The press were quite critical. Remember the Welsh project? But she won favor internationally eventually, serious favor. She became famous, like Stephen Bailey says. Fame is your brand. And I'm not here advocating that you get PR machinery to get lots of coverage and become famous. I'm just stating a simple fact, I think, that her fame became before her brand. And it was her fame that allowed her to then place her name and get those other commissions and start doing product design and other things that you could say is, oh, they just get Zaha Hadid because she's a brand. Well, it's not that simple. And I think it's foolish to think that you can just get a branding agency and hope to be a brand like her without having something behind you, which she's obviously had, more than something. Now, this is something like I said, I'm very fond of drawing as a mode of presentation. There's a lot of talk about photography, and that is important. But drawing is a particular skill you have. It's a particular voice you have as architects. And if you draw in a consistent style, you have drawing protocols in your office. David Chipperfield used to work with Gabor Galov to do that, who's done all these drawings. These aren't for him. One's for Tim Hatton, one's for Eliza Morrison on the left, and the one at the top on the left, I can't remember, I'm sorry, but they're all by Gabor, showing that even one architect can assimilate the voice of a practice to present that in drawing form. And drawing is a very good way of communicating your sensibility as an architect. And it also adds value to what you've done. Just showing someone a set of photos of a completed building isn't the same as sharing the process. I think it gives a depth to your work. The other thing that architects don't tend to do very well, this is an example of an absolute masterpiece by Sarah Buchanan in their Berlin office, but they don't do very well is their offices. Often studios are a real disappointment for clients and press alike. They're just not what you would expect. Here you walk in and you get more than you'd expect. You get the kind of Hollywood feel of, something Woody Allen would have chosen as a location for the perfect architect's office. It's considered, it's all high quality, it oozes of their love of what they do, their creativity. It lifts the whole team, I'm sure. This is the kind of environment where good ideas come from, a good culture is created, a good identity is created, both within the practice and also for the outside world to see. So more attention to your offices, please. Now, many of you are working in larger practices, and sometimes you might think, well, there isn't that much I can do really to become a leader here. There's some things I've noticed having worked for quite a few large practices over the years. If you have technical expertise, sustainability has been a huge one, but this is a good way to lift yourself into a leadership spokesperson type position that you're wheeled out to talk to clients, to talk to press, to lift your profile. But it doesn't have to be sustainability, it might be conservation, it might be a particular building technique. You might have a special interest, you might have an interest in a particular era, a particular type of architecture. Loads of different things that come into play that can become real useful assets for an architect's practice. A lot of people use teaching as a good way, publishing their expertise, curating exhibitions, and also geographic things are very important. If you're from a country or part of the country that you can be a spokesperson for, that's really valuable if you know about it, obviously. So all things to consider as you, as an individual, are thinking about improving your leadership position within the practice you work for. And also, if you're a practitioner on your own, these are obviously ways to stand out. Particularly in front of the press, I think expertise is something they're really pleased to get. Who's the person we need to talk to about a particular kind of brick or whatever it might be? If you're known for that, it goes down well. Social media is something we talk about a lot. I found this on the internet by a chap who, Ryan Erskine, who writes for Forbes on social media. Brand messages see 561% more reach when shared by employees instead of the brand itself. And I found that really interesting. It hadn't occurred to me because, as big companies, you invest a lot in that brand or you invest a lot in your social media strategy. But the fact that your employees are vouching for you is actually much more powerful. And, that all gives you an opportunity to cheer on the practice you work for. But you can also do a lot for yourself on social media, obvious Twitter, blog, etc. You know them very well. And I've just included photos of 3 people who have caught my eye on Twitter. Nathaniel Furman, who you might be familiar with, he's a kind of postmodern fan. He's made these wonderful resin objects, and it's that kind of picture candy, that kind of visual stuff that really makes you notice someone. And again, it's this pleasure. He's joyful, we need a bit of joy. And these are people who are very compelling and get noticed, so he's got coverage on the back of that. There's a Finnish curator who's worked for Drawing Matter. interested in architectural drawings, Markus Lahtenmäki, and I like his Twitter image. He's with a pipe on a sailing boat. That's Alvar Aalto's biographer to the T. Again, it's something that has a strong personality, and I think you should be able to play with these things too. And then there's someone who's really interesting too, Nick de Klerk, who works for Ocket, a big commercial firm. But he's been able to craft, particularly through blogging and Twitter, a personality of his own that I wouldn't be surprised if he's asked to speak outside of Ocket completely as himself. What does Nick have to say? And that's both good for Ocket and, of course, for himself as an independent person becoming a leader in a field. And I've noticed that his positioning himself this way has also caught the attention of media. So all useful things to think about. But there's another useful asset that you may have if you're under the wing of a big practice. They may have an in-house communications team. And these are teams that sometimes you kind of think, the in-house PR is coming and hassling me. They want a drawing, they want more data, the project's not complete yet. They're going to ask me for the 10th time, is it complete? It's not complete. So we develop these funny relationships with these people, and they become the kind of person, the nagger. You're often called the nagger. I hate being called the nagger, but you end up being called the nagger. In fact, in my first job, my first client I worked with was Allies and Morrison, and they said, your job is to nag. So at least that made me feel a bit better about it. But the in-house communications team is great in the sense that if you win their trust, if they know that you don't spill the beans on client confidentiality issues, if they know that you do what you say on time, editorial deadlines are really very tight, they're unforgiving. You don't get there, you don't get published. So once they have trust in you and that you're someone who's, who wants to take this seriously, who wants to give good material, then they'll work with you and you will become an asset to them, and they will want to use you as part of the resource to promote that practice. And that's again a way to become much more of a leader in that practice. I should say that sometimes it's quite depressing on the PR end of things, because the information you get is often very lousy from architects. You don't get where the project is, you don't get who it's for, you don't even get what it is, really. I mean, those are pretty basic things that you need to know. And another thing a lot of architects like doing is, when they don't want to particularly do a task, is they dump it all on you. So you get the 60 meg files kind of coming in and all unedited. And then they say, why did you use that image and not this one? You've been given 100 images. So there's a lot of stuff you can do to work with your PR team, if you've got one in the practice, to actually make you a much more popular asset to them, just by saying who, what, where in a proper way, and providing them with the visuals that actually you would like to have used on your project. Sounds very common sense, but this is all the stuff that happens in haste, that doesn't happen well. And it's actually, I have to say, having done this for so long, this doesn't take huge skill in some ways. If you just do what you say you'll do and you do it to a decent standard, you can get published much more easily than you think, because so few people do. And if you stick to the deadline, it's amazing how many people get tripped up by the most ridiculously mundane things. And this is my last slide. And I'd like to return to the thing I talked about in the beginning with the tightrope walker and this notion of duality. Here's a quote by someone who's a good person to end on, Frank Lloyd Wright. This is from an interview he did. Early in life, I had to choose between honest arrogance and hypocritical humility. I chose the former and have no reason to change. Now, arrogance is something we've touched on today. Our architects, engineers get told they're way too arrogant, particularly architects. I'm not here to say arrogance is great, but I think confidence certainly helps. And without a certain degree of real confidence and belief in what you do, without a great degree in it, and the way you communicate it when it comes to your identity, not just when presenting to planners, etc., you are going to end up in a situation where you are pandering. Leadership is really about getting people to see the way things your way, not to mean that you don't listen to other things, but it's about bringing them with you. And if you're not in command of that situation as an architect, you're not leading. You may be doing what the client wants you to do, and that has certain virtues. And sometimes you end up with a client that you both want to do the exact same, but I haven't heard that story that often. So I think that my message to architects is that they really do need to listen to their voice and to have confidence that just because you think in a different way to the client doesn't mean that you can't convert the client. And I think we give in too easily. We just say, oh, you know, it's terrible out there. I need an elevator pitch. There's a shark pool. I need to think like a developer. But I actually had a very experienced London developer say to me, we're doing a film for Arabs, and he said to me, really is sad, you know, architects used to tell me what to do here, and they used to show me the way and introduce me to new things, and now I feel the whole situation's turned. You know, the architects are just there sort of hoping to get a job, basically. Now, if that's all you're seen to be doing, you're not doing the right thing. I think, as Hugh Pierman said, you mustn't be too needy. That goes for press and for clients. And I'll add one thing if I've got time. Do I have time? It's interesting when you go to an architect's office and they want to talk about a project or what they're doing generally, and maybe you bring someone else to see them, so you're hyper aware that this goes well. And often there isn't that much to show unless you're in an architect's office where they're good at this. And sometimes they show up with just a kind of piece of paper, you know, old sheet, brochure sheet, and kind of try to talk about this project. And then you kind of think, well, heavens, you know, they've designed this whole thing. Why isn't there more to show? Oh, it's the wrong visuals. It's the visuals we did for the client. They're not right. They don't really convey our idea. Project's much better than that. Those are just commercial visuals. That really is bad. If you don't have the visuals to tell your story, to be proud of, to say this is what we want to do, you're not doing yourself any favors. I know it's more work. You have to think about the planners and what gets through, and you have to kind of, you know, get the client to agree. But you're going to have to produce the things that make you really feel, this is it, this is who I am, this is my identity. And on that note, I shall thank you. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.